Good morning. It is September 22nd, and this is the OSU Turf Team Times. We've had a somewhat of a balmy September, probably getting on the dry side for some. Temperatures have been comfortable for the most part. A little bit of a warm up this week, but I think Ohio could kind of say, despite all the rain we've had relatively nice summer compared to other parts of the country. Online today, we got Dr. Drs Gardner, Dr. Carr, Dr. Drs Shetlar, and the inimitable Pamela Sherratt, who's still in mourning over her Everton FC team. Pamela, take it away. Mom, you're muted.
All right. Let me see where we are here. So, good morning, everybody. I just wanted to do a quick review of what we've been up to, and then I'm going to pass off to Drs Gardner and Shetlar to elaborate on some of the things I'm going to say. So, we had 3 days at Farm Science Review this week. This is a big ag show that's out near Springfield, Ohio, and the numbers were just released today. 116,000 people in 3 days came through the show. So Drs Gardner, Carr, and myself were there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week. It's predominantly ag, so we don't have a huge amount of turfgrass people, but the people that we do have make it worth going. So we have prospective students that we can talk to because they have thousands of students in the FFA programs from across Ohio that are there. So we get an opportunity to market our turfgrass degree programs. We have a lot of landowners. This is a place where a lot of landowners go, whether it's homesteaders, farmers, agronomy guys. The people that own the majority of farmland in Ohio are at this event. So it gives us an opportunity to see what's going on in the state. Another part of it is this is where a lot of the legislators go. And so not just the college administration and university administration, but also the people that make policy in regard to the green industry go to this event. So it's an opportunity for us to schmooze with them a little bit, get them to know who we are and what we do for the state. And so it's a great event that we go to, and I think it's worthwhile us being there. We did field a lot of questions. Most of the questions are homeowner type questions. What is the best turf grass to use in my lawn, things like that. So this is a picture I took yesterday. We have 6 turfgrass plots out there. These were seeded 6 years ago and very minimal maintenance. So these plots get fertilized maybe once a year. They get mowed by the farm staff at Farm Science Review, and then leading up to the show, I will go out there and mow them a little more. But this is about as low maintenance as it gets. And I think it tells a great story. In this heat and drought, the fine fescues are burning out, not doing too well. Perennial ryegrass, same. Because it's such low maintenance, our Kentucky bluegrass plot is pretty much full of dandelions, plantains, and other weeds right now, and not able to compete with those weeds because Kentucky bluegrass, as we know, needs at least 4 pounds of N a year to grow healthily and be able to outcompete those weeds. But I'm always amazed at how well not just the K31 does, but the nearest plot to us in this picture is the improved turf type tall fescues. This is not actually a mix. It's a monostand of a variety called Titan. It's 6 years old. There's no weeds in there. It's thick. It's dense. Keep in mind, these plots aren't irrigated. And so it's a great visual to talk with homeowners about the importance of picking turfgrass varieties and species for your lawn, depending on what level of maintenance you want to put into it. And I think most people were really impressed with the improved turf type tall fescue. And so it gives us an opportunity to talk about that. We also had a lot of questions about weed control, nimblewill control, ground ivy control. And I know Dr. Gardner will probably talk about that, so I'll leave that to him. And then a lot of questions about grubs. I'll come back to that in a moment. So this is my lawn, and I know Dr. Shetlar is going to talk about this. This area of my lawn is predominantly rough bluegrass because it gets a lot of shade under a tree. And I just noticed, I thought, whoa, we really do have a dry conditions right now in my lawn. And then I got on my hands and knees and I pulled the turf back. And yeah, I found these little, what do we call them, Dr. Shetlar? Lawn shrimp, we're having a little party under my dead grass. And so Dr. Shetlar is going to be talking about that next. And then I just wanted to mention lastly that we still have this ongoing series of establishment. My latest one is about mowing. When should you mow after you've established, and some other tips on that topic. So I think that's it for me. I will hand the mic back to whoever's next. Thank you, Dr. Nangle.
Thank you, Pam. So you've now got a video online of grubs wiggling around, shaking their butts. All right. Dr. Shetlar, follow that up with some control options, maybe.
Thanks. Pam, before you bail right there, were those segments on our website? Where exactly do you get those segments that you were talking about?
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes, buckeyeturf.osu.edu. You can definitely get to them in the news section. All of those articles will be listed in chronological order.
Perfect.
So guys, let me go ahead and add there. I've added a something to the homepage. Depending on when you get on the Buckeye Turf website, you'll find something that says "What are the steps to establishment" on the homepage, and you click on that, and it will give you all of our all the articles in the turf establishment series. So
right.
That is an easier way to find it.
Perfect. I'm getting daily pictures and requests. So what do I do about these? I call them land shrimp at this time. I've chosen for my background the 3 stages of a white grub: first instar, second instar, and the big fat and sassy third instar, the land shrimp size. And I always find it interesting that the birds and raccoons are and skunks are pretty attuned that they just wait until they become the big ones that make it worthwhile for them to be digging up the white grubs and eating them. Across most of Ohio, they have reached the third instar stage. I noticed in your video there was a little second instar still there. There are a few of those. The problem that the grubs are having right now is this drought. In many of the cases when the soil gets really dry, they'll just kind of hang out there. They'll make a little cell in the soil. They just sort of spin around, and that makes a little ball in the soil to conserve their moisture. But I'm afraid if we do have a rain event, all hell with them, because then the feeding and so forth. Now, I mentioned that because this could be real problematic for those of you that are trying to do a rescue treatment for the white grubs. Remember, the 2 insecticides that I normally recommend is our old friend Dilox. And homeowners can still get Dilox if they go to the garden center, if they might still have it on the shelf. I noticed that the shelves are emptying out pretty rapidly right now. But the Bayer Advanced 24-hour grub control still contains the Dilox product. Now, if you're going to use Dilox does have significant contact toxicity. In other words, if the residues of that granular treatment, when you irrigate and wash it off of the granule and it percolates down through the thatch, if it hits the grub exoskeleton, it could go through the exoskeleton and kill the grub. That's what we mean by contact toxicity. The other insecticide that I have recommended as an alternate for that is Arena. The clothianidin products do a very good job. I've also heard that Xylam, the dinoteffuron, does a fairly good job as a curative insecticide, but I don't have many studies and I don't have indicated trials where that's been shown to be effective, but it should be effective. both Dilox and Xylam are water soluble, so they should move through the soil and thatch profile faster even than Arena. But Arena has been doing a pretty good job. The only problem that I've got with Arena is that Arena has very poor contact toxicity. In other words, it's a stomach poison. The grubs have to be actively feeding and ingest it. And so again, if the grubs are a little dry spell and not feeding, you're not going to get much activity out of that. So if you pull the turf back, look at the grubs. If they're like the ones that's shown in Pam, that they're wiggling around, moving around, they have a little black or dark part to their cecum, and that means they're actively feeding, and something like Arena would work. Again, the key to maximizing control, if you're not regularly irrigating the turf and the soil is nice and moist, we recommend irrigating the day before you plan to make the application. In other words, apply a couple of tenths of an inch of water to moisten the thatch, moisten the top layer of the soil, and then right after the application, irrigate again. And again, try to get somewhere around 2/10 of an inch to maybe 1/4 of an inch of irrigation down to help move the insecticide down to the soil thatch interface where the grubs are feeding. So that's my recommendation for this week, and it's primarily grub control season.
Thank you, Dr. Shetlar. Nothing like insect season to get everybody all bent out of shape. I did see some images from out west where is it the javelinas or javelinas, Dave, how they pronounce that? I've absolutely been going to town on some golf courses out there.
Oh yeah. You can get it's kind of interesting. Possums for some reason don't seem to go after them, but if you've got wild boar or any of that, they'll go after it. Crows are very adept at figuring out where grubs are too, and they will come up and peck the turf. They're like a herd of turkeys through. They can really rototill the.
Nice. Thank you, Dave. All right, Dr. Gardner.
So, Dr. Shetlar, I use that Dilox product on my lawn too. And, I have to laugh because 30 years ago as an undergraduate student, I remember when they talked about the OP insecticides and they mentioned that Dilox was kind of the weak stepchild compared to things like Dursban and all of the other ones. And now it's the only one that's still legal to apply, right? But I'm not here to talk about that. I should actually talk about weed control. Yeah, so let me go ahead and get this started. So now is the time to start thinking about controlling perennials. Well, now people usually control these in the spring because that's when people notice them, right? Round 2, because that's when people are out in their yards and they notice when dandelions are blooming. But just remember, if you have a problem site that you're trying to actually get rid of the weeds in a meaningful way for a long period of time, that fall always has and will continue to be the most effective time for that to occur. The other nice things about that are it's a lot less likely that you're going to damage ornamentals with drift because the leaves are falling off of the plants. And winter annuals, if you have issues with those are also controlled. And I like to show this picture. This was a test plot. These applications were made on November 21st, when it was like 45 degrees and misting. And this was the following spring when the ash trees were coming back out. You remember ash trees, right? But this plot stayed clean until the following October. Spring applications are good for usually about 8 weeks. Fall applications are good for up to a year. So it is just much more effective. That said, this is, tomorrow's going to be fall, but it's not necessarily the best time to be spraying those broadleaf weeds just yet because it's kind of dry, right? So I've had some questions about what happens when you spray herbicides when it's dry. And well, that increases the chance that you're going to have injury to turf grass. Unfortunately, it's hard to predict exactly how much injury because that's going to vary based on the product and the rate that you use, the soil moisture content at the time of application, the weather at and after application, the turf species and cultivar, etc. So no statement can be made other than if you spray herbicides when it's dry like this, there's more of a chance that you'll have phytotoxicity. So maybe hold off for a little while, because usually October or even the first week of November is a better time to make that application anyway. That said, make sure that you're using the right type of herbicide. There should be an ester in the formulation. Amines are what you use in the summertime. Esters are what you use in cooler weather, so spring and fall. So those of you that came to the field day this year, you might have noticed that some of those fancier 4-way herbicides were actually a little bit less effective for control compared to some of the 3-way products. And that's because the esters, well, they ended up, I sprayed this in the morning when it was like 80 degrees, but those formulations ended up controlling whatever weeds were in the sky above the plots, which of course was nothing. And so, like I said, you use esters in the fall and in the spring, and use amine formulations in the summertime. Had some people say to me things like, hey, you know, the stuff that I use, it's just not, it doesn't seem like it works anymore. I'm starting to worry that weed resistance might be real. Okay, so you know, that thing where a plant is born and it resists the action of the herbicide. And so if you keep spraying the same stuff, you're not going to get control. The problem that we have in turf, and it's kind of large, is that all of your standard 3-way herbicides contain stuff that it's all the same class of chemistry. If you take some of the other products that include the pyridonoxy herbicides, well, those all work exactly the same too. So we don't have a lot of rotation options for us in turf if we find that, you know, like it doesn't seem like our dandelion or our clover are going away the way that we hope. There's haloxyphene, which if you have herbicide resistant buckhorn plantain, this is an oddball because it's structurally the same as herbicides like clopyrrolid and fluroxypyr, but it works just different enough, binding site, whatever, that it does work on 2,4-D resistant buckhorn plantain. So that's game on herbicide. But, you know, even if you use some of the 4-way herbicides and include the protox inhibitors, well, those are contact herbicides. So that's not really an option if you have a resistance problem. So what we're left with is either flurazulam, which is marketed as Defender, which is a good option if you seem to be having trouble with dandelion, clover, or winter annuals, and then mesotrione. Okay, so that's tenacity, or also there's a new combination herbicide, Sublime, that combines mesotrione with dicamba and triclopyr. So if you suspect that you have a weed resistance issue, I would say try Defender or Sublime or Tenacity. And if the weeds then do go away, then you know that you probably do have a resistance management problem, and maybe report that to us or, you know, the state or whoever. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about real quick is, you know, this is the time of year that people start thinking about trying to get rid of their savanna grasses, because these are the ones that form the light colored patches in the lawns after frost. So things like Bermuda grass, which has a series of spikes, or nimblewill, which has a single spikelet and relatively long awns. Now, the question comes up, how do you control nimblewill? Okay, so there is literature out there that suggests that tenacity and or Pilex in particular, so topramazone, Pilex, is effective for the control of nimblewill. And so other states, my colleagues in other states have publications that say that. The comment that I would make is that Pilex probably provides control of nimblewill that is similar to the control that we expect when we use tenacity on creeping bentgrass. Okay, so you can use tenacity to selectively remove creeping bentgrass from Kentucky bluegrass, and a lot of times that works. Sometimes people are frustrated because the creeping bentgrass seems to come back relatively soon after those applications are made. I would say that it's probably the same thing here, where you can try the Pilex as a selective herbicide to control the nimblewill, and that should work, but there's an increase, you know, there's a chance that it won't. And so, you know, if that's the case, then, you know, you're left with our friend glyphosate, the non-selective herbicide. Yeah, that's what I have for this week.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Dr. Carr.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here today. So I'm going to touch a couple points kind of all over the place. One was since we last spoke, the Ohio Sportsfield Management Association Field Day was held. Had a pretty good turnout for that event, and was glad to be a part of that alongside with Dr. Nangle and Dr. Petrella as speakers for that at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. So that was a really cool experience to be a part of. Something else, and we'll talk about programming more at the end, but we've kind of had this big push about turfgrass establishment in a lot of these previous episodes, and that window for seeding our grasses is starting to close. We typically want seed on the ground before October 1. I know we have some warm temperatures coming, but Kentucky bluegrass in particular takes a long time to establish, and so we want to be able to get that seed up and germinated, and at least try to get a mowing on it before we can get a frost. Another issue that we have when it comes to establishment is irrigation. It's been really dry. A lot of our mature grasses are going dormant, and if you can't apply irrigation to your seed, it's not going to come up. And so really you need to make sure you have some kind of irrigation available if you want to put that seed out. Another thing that we're facing with our droughty conditions is fertilization. We want to be able to put fertilizer out in the fall. It's the best time to put fertilizer out for our cool season grasses. The cheapest fertilizer to put out are quick release sources like urea and ammonium sulfate. But if you can't irrigate that in, you need to resort to some kind of slow release fertilizer like a polymer coated or sulfur coated urea or other slow release sources to be able to get some fertilizer in the soil, so that when irrigation or when rainfall does come, that's available for plant uptake. Something that many of you should be seeing in the coming weeks is the OTF conference and show preview. A couple of things I wanted to mention about that. That is December 4th through 7th of this year, downtown Columbus. On Monday, we'll be featuring a soccer workshop for sports field managers and public schools, grounds, parks and recreation. Ben McGraw is coming this year to talk about annual bluegrass weevil, among other insect areas. Aaron Patton's coming over from Purdue, and we're going to have Sun Rossline from Jeffco Public Schools out in Colorado. She's also the Sports Field Management Association president currently. So we're really excited about that, and there are many other outside speakers that are coming in as well that will make for a good program. Something else that we're doing is on the Wednesday morning of the OTF conference and show, a couple of us are building a calibration workshop for sprayers and spreaders. We'll do that on the trade show floor, and that'll be a good hands-on opportunity to learn how to calibrate these things. So be on the lookout for that. We're really excited about the program this year and seeing everybody at the conference and show. So that's all I have, guys.
Tyler, could you quickly address, we're getting towards that time of the season where people are, thinking about putting their turf to bed for the winter time. And I'm old enough to remember that everybody used to say you really need to think about late season dormant fertilization. And I believe there have been some significant changes in that. Could you quickly address that?
Yeah, so the concept of late season fertilization, I don't recommend dormant fertilization at all. But there's this concept of late season fertilization where you're making your last nitrogen application following the last mowing, but before the turf grass goes dormant. And we see good color responses from that in the spring. The problem with that is that it could potentially lead to that nitrogen leaching through the soil, causing some environmental concerns and water quality concerns. So that needs to be explored further. But with the information that we have, I would recommend having your last nitrogen application sometime in October, preferably as a quick release source, and then continue fertilizing in light amounts in the spring whenever temperatures are conducive. So with that color response, that's something that's really desirable to people. But if you're applying 1 pound to 1.5 pounds of nitrogen in late November or December, a lot of that's not going to be taken up by the plant and could probably end up in groundwater.
Thank you, Dr. Carr. Sure, someone's not going to like that, but anyhow. Okay, I don't know. Just tell the truth. Just on the disease front with the dry conditions, we've seen somewhat of a decrease in problems. The only thing that has started to really pop up on older bluegrass, ryegrass lawns is rust. And I've seen some pretty bad rust outbreaks. Now, fungicide application probably not going to be needed unless it's on a newly seeded area where it's starting to show up, which we shouldn't be seeing, but it's possible that it does occur. Other than that, if these conditions hold, we may see some, if we get moisture, we may see some late season dollar spot, but this dry conditions probably going to limit most of that. And then next thing that people are going to think about in the southern part of the state, to watch soil temperatures as they drop. If you're dealing with large patch historically, you want to be thinking about 60, 65 degrees and probably DMI fungicides. And then after that, moving on to looking at snow mold treatments. Without anything else to be added other than you did forget Dr. Joe Vargas will be here at OTF. For many of the people, that's a big deal,
Yes.
Tyler.
Yes, it is.
The Buckeye Turf at osu.edu is our email, and we have been getting questions coming in through that. And then at OSU Turf is our Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, handle, and OSU ATI Turf, and then Turf Team Time, Spotify, and the podcast. But we are.
And this is Dr. Vargas's last year at in Michigan State, so it's awesome to have him on the program this year.
Yeah, we're very lucky to have him in. All right, thank you, folks. We will talk to you all again in 2 weeks unless there is a Armageddon.